are now listening to the Paul McGUIRE Report. This is Paul McGUIRE. On today's program, I want to pick up where we left off, in a sense, in analyzing and understanding what's happening in our nation right now. So, you've been following the news. I'm sure, like most people, have been following the news. The news at this particular moment continues to be dominated by the whole Charlie Kirk thing, specifically the memorial of Charlie Kirk, the statements of his wife, Erica Kirk, and the fact that you have this massive stadium in Arizona, which could hold a Super Bowl, and it's completely jam-packed. Not only is the massive sports stadium jam-packed with followers of Charlie Kirk, but there are various overflow places, and in addition to the overflow places, there is a giant hockey stadium, which is not that far from the stadium where the memorial service was held. So you have something like, 100,000 people that are physically attending this memorial service. And 100,000 people makes it one of the largest events ever in the history of everything. It exceeds political turnout. It exceeds sports turnout. It's massive. And this is just a drop in the bucket. In addition to that, you have the estimates by people in the media regarding how many people actually watched the Charlie Kirk memorial service, or if they didn't watch the whole thing, they watched segments of it. And that means people all over the world, like South Korea and France, and you name it, all over the world, and nations all over the world, all across the United States. And this includes people who watched the entire memorial service, as well as the people who may have watched 30 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, increments, and people who watched the entirety of it. But the key thing to remember is that the total number of people that tuned in to the Charlie Kirk memorial service was in excess of 1 billion people globally. Now, that is a staggering, massive number. And it's unheard of. That doesn't happen for anybody regarding anything. You got about 1 billion people watching this. And the primary content of what is being broadcast all over the world, all across the United States, the primary content is spiritual content. It's about biblical Christianity. It's about God. It's about being born again. It's about having salvation by faith in Jesus Christ. And the basic message, so no matter where you are and you're tuning in all over the world, you are, first and foremost, above everything, you're getting the gospel of Jesus Christ presented to you. And that holds true for people in the United States, whether they saw the whole service or parts of it. They received, and they were impacted, or potentially impacted, by the gospel of Jesus Christ. So analysts have said that this would make the Charlie Kirk memorial service the largest Christian evangelistic meeting in the history of the world, because you had 1 billion people watching it either live or they were there or whatever. 1 billion people who first and foremost were tuning in to hearing the gospel of Jesus Christ presented. Now, you may like Charlie Kirk, you may not like Charlie Kirk. That's really secondary. The point is that it's like the Apostle Paul said. The Apostle Paul was challenged and questioned because somebody who didn't have necessarily the greatest reputation with everybody there were Christian leaders in Paul's time that were going to write this guy off. And the Apostle Paul responded, and I'm paraphrasing, he responded by saying, whether their motives are right or not, and I'm not speaking of Charlie Kirk, I'm talking about the Apostle Paul, whether their motives were right or not, the point is, it still resulted in the preaching of the gospel of Jesus Christ, and people were getting saved. That was Paul's emphasis above everything. Now, that's not a justification for encouraging or allowing, all kinds of nonsense, all kinds of bad doctrine, and all kinds of other weird stuff in on something, and then justifying all the weirdness by saying, well, the gospel of Jesus Christ has been presented. That's not where we're going with this. We're not looking for a justification of everything because the gospel of Jesus Christ was presented. But Paul did say something to that effect, and he wasn't promoting a free-for-all. He was promoting the idea that his goal, the Apostle Paul's goal, was above everything to win people to Jesus Christ and to encourage or empower or whatever anybody else that was winning people to Jesus Christ. Now, that can be a very challenging walk to walk on. I know, I understand that. But that's my basic position. I don't necessarily agree with everything. And I'm not talking about particularly Charlie Kirk. He appears to have been very gifted. I have talked to a number of people, including people that are in my family on the East Coast. And many of them, not all of them, but many of them are extremely liberal in their political positions. And one particular individual that I talked to has been a lifelong Democrat, and the purpose of this conversation is not to get into this Democratic Republican thing, but this person was a lifelong Democrat. And so I broached the question very surgically and delicately because I was anticipating potentially the the exact opposite of what this person told me. I was expecting this person to, based on previous conversations, unleash a torrent of criticism about Charlie Kirk. To my shock and surprise, this lifelong liberal, this lifelong humanist, is brokenhearted over the fact that Charlie Kirk was killed. This lifelong liberal and Democrat, a humanist, was brokenhearted that Charlie Kirk lived, thought it was totally outrageous, totally unbelievable that he did get killed, because to use their words, all he was doing was exercising his freedom of speech. He has the right to say the things that he was saying. And for the reason that he said the things that he's saying, which is his constitutional right, he was assassinated. And this person was very offended by that and thought it was very corrupt and evil, which it is. So you're not going to hear a whole lot about it in the media. You're going to hear something about it in the media. You have people who function as like professional agitators. They're always seeking to exploit the emotional moment and ratchet things up so that, people will go berserk against one another. They're trying to exploit the intense emotions. But I think they're the minority. I think anybody who shares a sense of decency, a person who shares basic human values, whether they're a humanist or a Christian, should be, theoretically anyway, should be outraged by what happened, as this person was, because this person knew that Charlie Kirk had a wife, children, a family, and all he was doing was encouraging the students at these various colleges to think beyond their programming, to think beyond their indoctrination, and for that, for motivating them to think for themselves, they killed him. And they killed him because he was so effective at what he was doing. And that's horrible. So in America, there's a lot of people out there, and they may be quiet about it because of their circle of friends, but there's a lot of people who would call themselves liberals, a lot of people who would call themselves Democrats, who are not happy with what they saw, and they were quite upset by what they saw in terms of Charlie Kirk getting shot to death for simply exercising his free speech. He was shot to death. And so the more intellectually honest the individual humanist is, the more ethical the individual humanist is, the more likely it will be that they will be offended by what they saw was done to Charlie Kirk. And the more likely it will be that they express those feelings openly, and word gets around. So you're not hearing that in a lot of the media. They're married to this. It's like Disney. I mean, for crying out loud. Disney knows that one of their number one customers, and it's always been this way, one of Disney's number one customers has always been towards parents and their children, because the vast majority of Disney products, not all of them, but the vast majority of Disney products and services, like the theme parks, are meant to be sold to children or parents who have young children. But they don't care about that. So after they disciplined a famous celebrity talk show host, they disciplined him and they fired him for the outrageous things he said about Charlie Kirk. And they were outrageous, by the way. But then I guess 2 days later, today, they met with this television talk show host who said these very offensive words about Charlie Kirk, and they hired him back on. And that's the reason they hired him back on, is because they have an agenda. Everybody knows what their agenda is. They're not hiding it. They are, I'm going to use the word progressive, but that's a very, very mild and sanitized description of what their real ideology is. They're full on with, this provocative, break all the barriers type of social engineering. They're all for it. So they privately, most likely, the executives at Disney, privately hate Charlie Kirk. And then you have a number of the celebrities whose audience numbers have been lagging for quite some time. They never talk about that when they're being grilled. But the fact of the matter is their audience numbers, the amount of people watching their network television shows, it's declining. They have declining audiences. People are not interested in them. And I can tell you why. It's not even politics. People are not interested in them because they're not funny. If you're going to rely on political comedics to make you laugh, first and foremost, above everything, they need to be funny. And so if they're really funny, you could probably elicit a laugh from a supporter of the person you're making fun of, not because the supporter believes in what you're saying, but the supporter will automatically react to something that is truly humorous. In other words, the supporter will laugh. But the majority of these guys and some girls are comedians that are committing the cardinal sin of comedy, which is they're not funny. And so that's why their audiences are declining. So they're not going to admit that. Bashing Trump, bashing Musk, bashing Charlie Kirk, bashing Charlie Kirk's wife is being exploited by them to cover up the fact that their termination or they're being forced to exit their programs is really due to the fact that their ratings numbers have collapsed into the toilet. People aren't watching them, or at least they're not watching them in the necessary numbers that you need to have a successful television show. So these guys are like what they call one-trick pony. And I think I learned what a one-trick pony was from Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel. I was watching an interview he did 1,000,000 years ago in which he defined a one-trick pony. And a one-trick pony is somebody in the horse business or pony business that has a pony or a horse that they only train to do one thing to entertain the audiences. So after that pony does the one thing that it has been trained to do to make the audiences happy, that pony has one trick, and that's it. And they can't keep playing the same trick over and over again. People will walk out. Well, the same thing happens in the music business, like Paul Simon from Simon and Garfunkel. The same thing happens in the music business. It happens in a lot of businesses. If you're relying on one gimmick or one trick, that will soon become a total bore if you keep doing it over and over again. In order to be successful, for example, Paul Simon was in the music business. In order to be successful, you had to be able to perform a bunch of really hit variety songs. You couldn't just be proverbially the one-trick pony. And so we have a lot of these comedians who, first of all, their faces aren't funny. They look angry. I don't know about you, but when somebody's looking at me, even on television, and they look angry, that doesn't cause me to laugh. It makes me guarded. They look angry. They look like they're ready to lose it. And they're not funny. Their jokes aren't funny. They're pedantic, they're condescending, they're propaganda, and none of that arouses laughter in people. So they can get away with it if the situations around them are conducive to artificially propping up their comedy acts, even though they stink as comedians. you can get away with it as long as the winds of favor are blowing in the direction of your open sales. And by that, I mean this. When the climate was like anti-Trump hysteria and a good percentage of the public was going berserk regarding Trump, that gave a lot of these comedians and talk show hosts and others like them a lot of space, if you will, to keep doing half-baked jokes and keep delivering half-baked criticisms that weren't funny. They could get away with it for a while, and for years, in fact, as long as this three-ring circus continued in society with all these hysterical anti-Trump statements. You can get away with it for a while. But sooner or later, when the social conditions change and things get back to a relatively normal situation, you're not going to be able to get away with half-baked jokes of Trump because people are not into it. You're not being supported by the environment. And so now you're out there on your own, and you can't rely on the tricks of the trade, which is to capitalize on Trump hatred and pump it into your comedy routine. You can't do that. You can't get away with it. So when things change in society, the guy or girl who's a comedian or a talk show host that allowed themselves to become a one-trick pony, now that they can't use their one trick, which is Donald Trump, Donald Trump, Donald Trump, that doesn't work in the new environment. So since they have nothing else to go on, they're going to crash and burn relatively soon because people can see through it. When the situation is right and Trump is doing all of these things that arouse these people's anger, then the comedian who's a one-trick pony can capitalize on that public anger and get away with half-baked jokes for a long time. But sooner or later, that steam engine will run out. And so in the case of these comedians that got fired or threatened to be fired, it keeps changing. They were one-trick ponies. When the Trump situation began to work well, when the news of all the Trump successes kept lining up, not everything was a success with Trump. He's had a lot of problems since he got back in office. But Trump has devoted himself to the policy of pumping out into the general public for their consumption a never-ending stream of victories. Even today, Trump didn't waste hardly time at all talking about the memorial service. Trump had moved on to promoting the announcement that they found, allegedly found the cure for, different neurological diseases that children and adults have, like autism. And he announced, along with Robert Kennedy, he announced that they have a solution. Well, that grabs the American attention span totally. And Trump is a master of that. He's a master of manipulating the media for his own ends and purposes. So Trump has very intelligently infused the atmosphere of America's consciousness with a steady stream of embedded media, all celebrating his accomplishments. And so those things are coming at the American people so fast and furious that they're essentially dizzy from the overload of Trump downloads, if you will, celebrating all the successes. And that's done on purpose by Trump. That's how he survives. Okay, so when Trump is doing that, when Trump is really on his game and he's tossing ball after ball of success into the media, then the one-trick pony guys, the anti-Trump comedians and talk show hosts, they have no material. Their material is irrelevant because this is the reason why. These comedians, the reason they can get any laughter at all, and usually it's not real releasing anger. The anger that these cheap comedians can generate is kind of a flimsy, impotent style of laughter that's barely noticeable. In fact, you could characterize the one-trick pony talk show hosts and the one-trick pony comedians, you could characterize them this way. When they cause an audience to laugh, they're not really creating laughter among their audience. It would be more accurate to say they're creating a series of snickers. not as in Snicker bars, but as in the word snicker or Snickers. And as you know and I know, snickering is like a very subdued, quiet form of laughter. It's a kind of laughter which is very much suppressed so that you can snicker, which is a way of insulting somebody through your so-called laughter. And so these comedians can generate, at best, on a good day for them, a snicker, a little snicker of half-baked laughter. That is not an example of somebody who's really talented. Somebody who's really talented will create a mob of laughing, hysterical people. And that's hitting us a home run as a comedian. So bottom line is, when Trump is doing his job, he's firing too much positive stuff about himself and his administrations into the collective media atmosphere over America. And what that does is that on a deep psychological level, it pulls out all the energy that exists in people, energy that may be dark energy. I say dark energy because if the energy that you're storing up in your inner being is all based on what you perceive to be Trump failures, the comedian knows how to tie in the one-trick pony comedian. Excuse me, the one-trick pony comedian knows how to connect to your subconscious mind and get you and motivate you psychologically to laugh by tying into the trapped energy you store regarding a kind of suppressed anger you have towards Trump. It's like a psychological trick that they instinctively know how to employ. So they'll get some minimal amount of laughter from it. But when Trump is doing his job well, there's no feeding, if you will, of a person's inner personality with Trump derangement syndrome, for lack of better words. And thus, there is no existing catalyst to produce laughter. Okay? All right. I didn't mean to get into a psychological analysis of what produces laughter out of a Trump derangement syndrome, but I did. And we'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to the Paul McGUIRE Report. I'm Paul McGUIRE. Be sure to visit paulmcguire.us. You're listening to the Paul McGUIRE Report. This is Paul McGUIRE. Okay, so back to Charlie Kirk and his wife. Charlie Kirk, we assume, is in heaven. So if that is the case, and that would be the case if you're genuinely born again, that when you die, you go to heaven. So he's in heaven. He's doing all right. His family misses him. It's a tragedy. But what this has created is kind of like a mass chain reaction. You have Charlie Kirk, again, whether you like him or not, he had a very unusual gift in his personality in that he could challenge the college students who had been programmed to shut down their mind and stop asking questions. He could talk to the college students who were literally suffering from the after effects of secular educational brainwashing. And that's exactly what it is. I'm not embellishing that one iota. All of the students who went to the major universities and institutes of public education, all of them, and yes, all of us, to varying degrees, depending upon what years you were in these scholastic institutions, all of us in America, as well as in nations like Communist China, Communist Russia, and so on and so forth, make no mistake about it. The types of mind control and the content of the mind control may be very different between the United States of America and Communist China or Communist Russia. But these techniques, sadly to say, are universally being employed all across America and all across the world. So what's my point? My point is that there is a hidden agenda that has been carried out by the deep state. The deep state are following the marching orders of the super rich globalist elite. And these globalist elite, at the very top of the pyramid structure, this globalist elite are openly Luciferians, many of them anyway. They're openly Luciferians, and they either worship Lucifer or they're following the precepts of Lucifer. And they engage in SRA, satanic ritual abuse, which is very similar to the procedures in MK Ultra. Now, MK Ultra A lot of people don't know this, but Aldous Huxley, the father of Brave New World and the father of other books, who was a respected intellectual, he was the darling of the intellectual, scientific, and even high political circles of American society and British society. He was a member of the British elite. He and his brother Julian Huxley were hand trained. They were mentored. They were discipled, if you wish, by the famous science fiction author H.G. Wells, who wrote War of the Worlds with the Martians invading the Earth, the movie starring Tom Cruise. He wrote The Island of Dr. Moreau, which showed you what genetic engineering would be in a horror movie format. He wrote The Invisible Man. He wrote so many best-selling science fiction novels that were turned into big-budget Hollywood feature films. And then H.G. Wells wrote a whole series of very popular nonfiction books, like Promoting the New World Order, in detail. I've read all of his books. In his nonfiction books, he is aggressively promoting the New World Order. He wasn't neutral. So H.G. Wells was the father of British intelligence during World War I. He trained and discipled the two Huxley brothers personally to be directors of British intelligence. So he trained Aldous Huxley, the author of Brave New World, and then he trained Julian Huxley, who was the father of signed the first Humanist Manifesto, created Common Core, which is a social engineering dumbing down scheme promoted by the United Nations to be used by American educators in public schools. The goal of Common Core education is not to make your child more intelligent, it's to make your child more compliant and non-thinking, all the while sucker punching the parents into believing it's a success because they arbitrarily have manipulated the scoring system or the point system that your child receives. And all of a sudden, it appears to you that your child is suddenly going from failure to excelling at school due to Common Core. So in a misguided burst of enthusiasm, you think this is something to celebrate, because what you don't realize, because nobody told you, what you don't realize is that Common Core, yes, your child gets a higher score in Common Core, because Common Core is all based on this simple formula. And when I tell it to you, you're never going to forget it. It's really easy. Common Core is simply a strategy which reduces your child's education to the following foundation. And here's the foundation of Common Core. You don't teach children how to think. What you're doing is you're teaching children how to memorize the information they're reading, how to memorize the information being spoken to them by the teacher's voice, how to memorize everything the school is inputting in them in terms of articles, curriculum in their textbooks, what the teacher is saying. Those are all inputs. And how a child gets a great score in their school is not by thinking, not by questioning, not by developing their human perception, or not even using their human perception. The only thing that your child needs to get bigger scores, which means better schools to go into, better doors in life will open up for them. The only thing your child needs to do is to stop questioning, thinking, and perceiving. All your child has to do is simply memorize whatever it is the teacher is saying to them. They memorize. Whatever it is that the book is saying to them in written words, you memorize. Whatever other educational material you're being given under Common Core, you simply memorize it. And when your child begins to memorize in a non-questioning manner everything, including the teacher has presented to them, their grades will skyrocket, because their grades are not contingent at all upon thinking or understanding or perceiving or questioning. Your child's entire grade is based on whether or not they can regurgitate back to the teacher, back to the school, whether or not they can regurgitate word for word whatever the information was that was presented to them in the school textbook, or whatever the information was that the teacher spoke to them. to the degree that they will memorize whatever it was that was given to them. And then when it comes to the test, they're able to regurgitate back on the tests exactly what was said to them. So they don't have to understand or know anything. All they have to do is memorize the subject matter. That whole process is called Common Core. Now, why parents think it's giving their kids higher grades and making them smarter is because Common Core is a trick. It's a Trojan horse. In Common Core, it will look like the school will present you with an illusion that your child is more intelligent, because you're going to see a substantial increase in their grades. Their grades are going to go substantially up. But in order for their grades to substantially go up, they have to simply memorize whatever material is given to them by the teacher or by the textbook. You memorize it and then you regurgitate it back word for word. To the degree that you do that accurately, your test scores will skyrocket upwards, and you'll be getting higher and higher scores. Your parents, not knowing that there is rigging in the game, will be delighted. They'll think you're more intelligent. And this part is true. Doors will open for them to get into the better schools, hopefully the Ivy League schools, or at least the better schools of their choice. All kinds of doors will open up for them if they perform at a higher level due to Common Core. Common Core and the evaluation process could care less if your child understands anything, if your child knows how to think, or if your child knows how to question and perceive. That's irrelevant. Common Core simply expects the child to repeat by memory whatever it was that they were taught. And that's the game that's being played. So the goal of Common Core, when you read the proclamations and semi-private discussions by the biggest educators in the world, the biggest educators in America, you will see in their own semi-private scholastic professional publications, you will see them talk about openly the real game plan and the secret agenda for Common Core, which is they need to create a kind of subclass. They need to create a kind of permanent working class that will settle for more menial jobs, will settle for more lower incomes. And this is not being derogatory of anyone, because right now, some of the people or careers I'm going to mention actually make more money than the people who have college degrees. But don't count on that being that way in the future. So they know that the amount of good paying jobs in professional fields, especially due to the fact that AI or artificial intelligence is coming very quickly. In fact, it's here now, that the good jobs, the excellent jobs, keep getting small. The amount of jobs needed are smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So they need to prepare, equip, and educate, and yes, program newer generations of young people who will not be unhappy with today what would be considered lower level or menial jobs. So what they do is that through indoctrination and programming, they're deliberately creating a kind of permanent working class or underclass to do the more menial work. And they're not burdening these kids with having to have perception or understanding or advanced knowledge or to arrive at anything deeper. The only thing that they're requiring of these kinds of children is that the children memorize what the teachers and the schools want them to memorize. And then when test time comes around, they simply regurgitate or simply repeat what they have learned. So they can be dumbed down, which is what they are being. They can be dumbed down while at the same time the parent thinks that the child is doing better and better and better because the parent is deceived by the high-flying scores that the child is achieving in school. Now, this is not an accident. This was part of an intentional, strategic global plan developed by Julian Huxley, the father of transhumanism, at the United Nations through the UNESCO division. And it was designed, when you read the initial studies, which I have, it was called Common Core. And the whole emphasis was that this was a global educational directive being handed out and mandated by the United Nations and UNESCO. You see, their game plan is you have a scientific elite, the philosopher kings of ancient Atlantis. The system of the elite class, the globalist elite, who the Huxley brothers represent, and Common Core is designed to serve the globalist elite. I have research that I'm putting together today for a book, and it talks about how the national educational systems of America were, first they had private schools where people excelled and got smarter and smarter. The best of the private schools in early America were the Pilgrim and Puritan schools. All of our founding fathers and all Americans wanted their children to attend the Pilgrim and Puritan Christian schools run by the Bible-believing Christian Pilgrim and Puritans. Why? Because the Christian Pilgrims and Puritans in that time period had the best educational schools for developing child's minds, the best biblical spiritual schools for developing the moral character of children. And there was no better school that you could send your children to in that time period in early America than the Pilgrim and Puritan schools. They were above Catholic schools or any other schools. Now, because of the embracing of non-biblical theology by evangelical Christians, because of the embracing of a non-biblical worldview by Christians, because they ignored the true meaning of the Word of God, unlike the Pilgrims and Puritans, Christians began to desert the major centers of power in the United States. And first and foremost was the center of power known as education. The Pilgrims and Puritans, because they prioritized education both in the school systems they ran, but also in the home environments, the Pilgrim and Puritan Christian young people would have been considered geniuses in comparison to the dumbed-down children of our time. And it's not the children's fault in our time. They were part of a secret agenda. So, what is known theologically as the evangelical Christians, or the so-called Bible-believing Christians, rejected and neglected the importance of raising up a child in the faith, which the Bible specifically commands us to do. And the Bible specifically commands us to impart knowledge and truth and wisdom and history and all these other educational areas. We, God's people, were supposed to be developing our children aggressively and biblically all these years. But because our spiritual forefathers began to embrace faulty and non-biblical theology, we rejected many areas of power in our society, and rejected is a polite way for saying we literally gave over the power centers of our society. We gave them over to the devil and the devil's crowd. Now, I know that's simplistic, but that's exactly what we did. So, as time progressed, the secularists, in some cases the Luciferians and the secret occultists, and these people don't advertise their occult beliefs openly. You have to dig for it. But when we take Rockefeller in 1906, he created a national general education department for the United States, which allowed him to use his hundreds of millions of dollars of money, because he was super rich. He could use his vast fortune along with the vast fortunes of other super millionaires and billionaires in early American society. They began to use their money to create what was called public education. And the secret game plan, the secret agenda regarding public education from the very beginning, and I saw the documents last night when I was researching, was this. The globalist elite, the billionaire class and the super rich millionaire class, were terrified, very paranoid, and very insecure that the working class of America, and more importantly to them, the middle class of America, which was growing and earning money and to a relative degree becoming smarter and smarter to a relative degree, they were terrified. This globalist elite was terrified that the middle class would revolt either one way or another. They would revolt against the rule over them by this elite superclass, the ruling class. And they were paranoid and terrified that this would happen. So one of the primary secret and hidden agendas by the Rockefellers and the other billionaire, millionaire families is they developed a Department of Education, they developed public education, and then most importantly, they created a global and national curriculum, especially for American students, that would not only perpetually dumb down the students, but also indoctrinate the students, and then even further than that, program the students to not be able to think, act, behave, plan, run a business at the higher levels of thinking that were required. The globalist elite believed with everything in them that if they took over public education, they could program the minds of many generations of young people who may have been a threat to them because the generations of young people came from the middle class. But the globalist elite believed that if these children were programmed properly, beginning at the earliest age, they could program them to be dumbed down, socially engineered, and lower their IQ to such an extent that they would be controllable, they would be vulnerable to programming and brainwashing and social engineering, and that they would never be a threat to the elite class because they were programmed to never accumulate the money of the elite class. So in addition to their normal scholastic programming, there was all kinds of subversive and hidden programming that went along with it that had to do with embedding non-truths and limiting truths about money, about how to make money, about prosperity, about how to be prosperous. They were secretly indoctrinating and programming the children of the middle class in America. They were programming them subtly on a subconscious level to accept all these false belief systems regarding money, finances, building your own businesses, entrepreneurship, making money so you could become super rich. They were programming all these counterproductive mindsets into the lives of young children, beginning at the earliest age, with the intentional outcome of socially engineering them so they would never be a threat to the elite class. They would be perpetually in debt, perpetually in servitude to the elite class. And the mechanisms of servitude, or the actual metallic chains of slavery, would be assembled by embedding into their minds below the level of consciousness all these false paradigms that would guarantee to a large extent that the students would stay poor, stay in debt, never learn how to be economically free or economically prosperous. And all of this was done like a kind of giant sleight of hand underneath the eyes of Christian parents and parents of the middle class who thought, they sincerely thought they were keeping an eye on their child's education. They sincerely believed that. But the mistake that they made was a fatal mistake. The mistake that they made was they underestimated the deviousness. They underestimated what the Bible meant by the wiles, the strategies, the schemes of the devil. You see, the people who were putting into motion these satanic plots and plans were highly devious, highly evil. They were wise in their evilness. Why? Because in their heart and soul, they weren't born again. In their heart and soul, these men, this globalist elite, many of them anyway, had secretly sold their souls to Lucifer or the devil. So they were Satan worshipers. They were Luciferians. They conducted ritual sacrifices to secure their power. And so, like their father, the devil, they learned what Satan had already learned through Adam and Eve, and that is that mankind, men and women, can be manipulated by highly skillful and practiced methods called the wiles of the devil, which are the strategies, the psychological warfare, the persuasion, the indoctrination of the middle-class children, that you can put them in a trance. And this, I'm not just pulling this from the air. I've read textbook and academic book after book after book after book, documenting everything that I'm saying to you. Okay? And there's so much more. I have it in my books, Conquering the Matrix. What is Conquering the Matrix? Essentially, it's a book on how to conquer any potential brainwashing or social engineering that has negatively affected you or a loved one. In my book, Conquering the Matrix, or Power from On High, which tells the saga of my life story and my personal war against these spiritual dynamics and psychological dynamics, and my crusade to set people free in the name of Jesus Christ through the power of the gospel. That's in my book, Power from On High. The whole wiles of the devil, the schemes of the serpent, is in my book, The Day the Dollar Died, which simply and understandably exposes the massive subterfuge and the massive amount of deception that went into the creating of our monetary system. It's all, and it'll explode before you. It's really easy to understand when you read The Day the Dollar Died. I deliberately did not want to make it complicated. Also, the greatest battle for the hearts and minds of mankind. Fast-moving, intense, you'll be pinned to your seat as it rockets you through the key moments of history from the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus to our present moment. Are you ready? And the other books, you need to get them while they're on a discount at paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us. And then I want to say this. I believe humbly, by the grace of God, the unmerited favor of God, that ever since my childhood, when I was raised in an agnostic, humanist home, God's hand was on me before I even knew it was God who had his hand on me. But I sensed the hand of God. Isn't this weird? I sensed the hand of God, even though I didn't believe in God. It was the strangest thing. I couldn't shake it. And so I had a pivotal moment in third grade, which I've told you about. I won't go into it here, but you can read about it in the books, where I read Aldous Huxley's book, Brave New World, and it blew my mind. I had the closest thing I could have to a spiritual experience. God used my reading of the book, Brave New World, to open my eyes to the reality of what was really going on with this world system. And that began, even though I wasn't saved, my pilgrimage. And then you've read the other parts of the story, but the bottom line is, at a certain point, after I was saved, I knew the hand of God was calling me into one of the most unique and different ministries a person can have. I mean, when I try to describe my ministry to most people, they look at me bleary-eyed. They don't get it. And when I first started in this ministry, a kind of ministry that nobody else had, it was a ministry that you couldn't compare with anybody else's ministry. And yet it was clearly from God. But as the years went by, and people and myself began to see in the external reality of our nation and the external reality of our world, I began to see more and more proofs in living color, if you wish, that what I was talking about for decades and trying to warn people about was indeed true, because that which was hidden was brought into the light over and over again, like MKUltra, mind control, trauma-based programming, all this stuff that I talked about and people would challenge me on and fight me on. I mean, I received so much resistance. It was ridiculous. Not from the people in the occult. I would receive resistance from Christians who didn't want I was polite. I spoke the truth in love. People were getting saved and still are, left and right. People are being delivered left and right. But I was resisted intensely by Christians who thought they knew it all and thought that I couldn't be right. And the bottom line, why they resisted my message so much, was not that it wasn't biblical, because it certainly was. They resisted it with such force was because, and I wasn't trying to do this, but my message ended up shaking their comfort zones. They were comfortable playing church. They were comfortable playing church. They were comfortable with a soft Christianity. And again, even though I didn't attend this and I spoke to them as best I could in love, they were threatened by my message. And so in the last number of years, the last 7 or 10 years, so many of the things that I warned about decades ago have come blatantly true. And then when it comes to the present moment, we talk about Charlie Kirk and stuff like that. Troy and I were reviewing our work and the books we wrote, like The Babylon Code and Trumpocalypse and the articles and all the other stuff. And we didn't realize it at the time. Okay, this was back, I forgot the year. Was it 2014? I don't know the year. 2014 or 2017 or something like that. We didn't realize it because the rigging, the electronic censorship in the internet, the rigging, the other forms of censorship had not gone into its full-fledged high-power mode. The rigging was rather anemic. Okay. So first I began, because I hadn't met Troy yet, I began with my books, basically out there in the wilderness. But I began to faithfully, nobody paid me for this, by the way. Nobody pays me for the majority of what I do, by the way. And I won't get into that because I'm not into talking about it or bragging about it. But going back as far as I can remember, I was supporting the ministry with my own money, working other jobs, and every kind of endeavor. I was paying for my own ticket. So obviously I never entered the ministry to make money because it has cost me money, and I don't regret any of it. But way, way back when, this is when I was in Art Bell and all these shows, and I was speaking to millions of people because it wasn't rigged yet. And so I remember writing these articles for what I thought were mom and pop Christian or conservative organizations that maybe had, a mailing list at most of 5,000, 2,000, 10,000 people, maybe if they were amazing, 25,000 people. But I faithfully wrote these extensive articles. Many of them are available for you to read still for free at paulmcguire.us. And these articles were posted on a number of influential, conservative, Christian-friendly news websites. And so I would write an article like every week for years. Well, because I was telling the truth about subjects that most people didn't talk about on a regular basis, all these, what I thought were mom and pop, and I don't mean that derogatorily, what I thought were small outreaches, I would faithfully give them these articles. And they would distribute it along with links of homemade videos that I would make. Well, I didn't realize it. I was reaching a lot of people, even with my estimation of their numbers, which were extremely low. That still meant I was reaching a lot of people. What I didn't know, after doing this for like 5 years faithfully, and I did it a lot longer after that, I would do this faithfully, no pay, no remuneration. I just did it. It was my act of service to the Lord. And so I did it. I would send out to them on a weekly basis new article, and it would always be a dynamic, cutting-edge spiritual article mixed with a dynamic, cutting-edge, relevant topic. And I just kept at it. I was so busy planting the seeds of the gospel, I wasn't thinking about anything but the task at hand. Well, it was either the LA Times or the Washington Post or both. I can't remember. It's been a long time. They published an expose article on what they called the most influential, powerful voices in conservative / right-wing media. They weren't talking about me. They were talking about the publications that I was sending my articles to. But what I discovered based on their research, which was designed to discredit them, so they wanted to have accurate numbers. They did not want to inflate the numbers of people these publications reached on the internet. So I knew they had to be accurate. So my mouth was hanging open. I was stunned to discover that all these people that I was faithfully sending my articles and pictures and videos to for free, because they were selling advertising, I asked nothing for it. I did it for free. I told them, I'm giving you this for free. Just distribute it. Just post it. And if you can, I said, put it on the front page. I did that so people would read it. There was no money in it for me to be made. So when I read this expose article, I realized that I had the whole thing wrong in terms of the amount of people they reached, and I had the whole thing wrong as to the power that these so-called, what I thought were mom and pop operations. My mind was blown when I finally found out the truth of how many people they were reaching on a weekly basis. And it turned out that the top people I was sending my articles to were reaching like 1 million people every week. 1 million people every week, and I estimated them reaching 25,000. They were reaching 1 million people a week. And then the next one closer to that, the next publication closer to that might have been 750,000 people a week. And then the next one after that. It was more than just one in each column. Sometimes there were 7 or 5 publications in each column, numerical column. And then some would be reaching 500,000 each week. Some would be reaching 300,000 each week, some 250,000 each week. And even the smaller ones were reaching significant amounts of people, like 50,000, 25,000, 10,000 people a week. But when you added up all the people that were reaching 500,000, 250,000, 1 million, and in some cases it was 2 million, I was like shocked. It was like, Paul, you've been laboring to plant seeds of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I realized that all this time, without me knowing it at all, I was reaching millions and millions of people just on the articles, never mind the videos and the TV appearances and, all the rest of the stuff. Just on these articles alone, I was reaching millions upon millions upon millions of people. How many millions, I don't know. And if I was to total it all up in a good faith estimate, it would probably cause me more harm than it's worth, because people would inevitably think I was lying to them. But I'm not lying to you. I'm telling you the truth. That's exactly how it happened. I found out years later, while I was still doing it faithfully for nothing, and continued to do it for nothing. Why? Because the goal was to reach as many people as possible, not make money. There's nothing wrong with making money. But that was not my ultimate goal. So I found out that I was reaching millions upon millions, and that many of these, if I name the names of these publications today, because many of them are still around, and they're still very powerful distributors of information, you would know their names. You would recognize their names. But you see, the game has changed. Some of these organizations are still around. Some of these organizations would still publish my stuff, but there is a dirty, dirty amount of rigging going on from algorithms, bots, and other ways you can manipulate the internet and computers and control the flow of information by rigging the internet. So you see, it wasn't, the doors shut at a certain point. I don't know what, they began to shut slowly and then they slammed them shut. So what's my point? My point is, you never know in your life how much good that you're really doing. And you're going to have to do a lot of the stuff that you do for ministry, or because you believe the Lord told you to do it. You're going to have to do a lot of it by faith, because you may not know in this lifetime, or you may, like I found out, or you may find out later, that all the seeds of the gospel of Jesus Christ and giving that you have been doing faithfully in people's lives and so on and so forth, all of that impacted people that impacted people that impacted people. And you successfully helped change America and helped change the world. Think about it. You were faithful when nobody was looking, and God will reward you. This is Paul McGUIRE. We'll be back in just a second. Visit paulmcguire.us. Okay, this is Paul McGUIRE. You're listening to the Paul McGUIRE Report. So let's, again, look at this from a different angle, a slightly different angle. First of all, we're all placed here on earth to fulfill a purpose and a destiny. Not every single person. No one is excluded. Every one of us have a destiny and a purpose from God. And it usually involves doing or being a whole bunch of things, from taking care of somebody that society might write off as a burden, taking care of somebody that's sick, raising children, going to work in a job that you don't like. I mean, the list is endless. And then, of course, there are those things which you enjoy doing, which could be considered a blessing. The key is that we each attempt to grow spiritually, always understanding that none of us is perfect. And the minute you think you're perfect because you're comparing yourself to such and such a person, and you think, well, I don't have these sins in my life, or I'm a lot more loving and caring than that person, you're comparing yourself with somebody else. And then you're writing that other person off. And you may not admit it to yourself, you may not even be aware of it, but you think you are more spiritual or holy or whatever than the other person based on your criteria, your judgment set. So why am I bringing this up? Because the great danger when you enter this area, the great danger is to become legalistic and not even know, not even have a hint that you have become legalistic. Now, what do I mean by legalistic? Legalistic is when you attempt, we're saved by faith. We're saved by faith in Jesus Christ and the grace of Jesus Christ, which means unmerited favor. We didn't earn, and we never earn our salvation. Nowhere along the way to heaven do we ever earn our salvation. Salvation comes to us as a free gift, and it's totally unearned. So when we become legalistic, what we're doing, whether we realize it or not, is we're attempting to throw away the grace of God. We're attempting to throw away salvation by grace. And we enter into a different way, which is a way of deception. And the way of deception is we think that because we surmise that we're keeping the law of God, better than others, even if it's just 5% better. We think that because we're keeping the law better than other people, according to us. And of course, when we're looking at it from our point of view, we're totally biased. But when we're measuring how spiritual we are, how holy we are, how deserved we are for blessings, and we're attempting to get those things by a series of works, religious works, like feeding the poor, clothing the naked. It could be anything. And all of those things are very, very good. And all of those things God wants us to do. But we must never forget that none of those things are supposed to be put down on a piece of paper or on a computer and then tallied up to give us some kind of score. That's what a legalistic person does. Now, here's the trap that we all need to avoid. A legalistic person has fallen into the trap of attempting to earn God's blessing through performance or works. And a legalistic person thinks in their deception that they are more spiritual, more holy, and they have done more good things than other people. And so they will never say this, but they think in the secrecy of their hearts that they're better than other people. And that's the big trap. None of us are better than somebody else based on whatever number of things we're doing where we think that adds up to making us better than somebody else. And the minute we go down that pathway, we become a legalist, or we surrender to what's called legalism. Legalism is trying to earn God's blessings, trying to earn salvation by your performance. Now, if we were really honest about the whole thing, we would recognize that if we were really looking into the depths of our own hearts, the way God has the possibility of looking into the depths of our own hearts, we would see the reality concerning our own hearts. And the reality is this: the Bible says this to us for a reason. It says things like, all of your works, all of your religious works, God says, are like filthy rags to me. So when we attempt to perform, when we attempt to do religious good works in order to get God's blessings, God says to us that he perceives that just like this. He looks at all of our good works, and then God says, and this is kind of upsetting in a minor degree, God looks at all of our good works, and then he says, all of your works are like filthy rags to me. Now, what does that mean? Filthy rags would be disgusting rags. They'd be dirty rags. They'd be unclean rags. That's how God views our good works or our religious performance. But the actual translation of that term comes from this: all of your good works are like filthy rags to me. When you dig into the original translation, you discover that the filthy rags literally means the menstrual rags that a woman would have in ancient times or whatever during her time of having a period. So her period bathes the menstrual rags in blood and is considered unclean and unsanitary. So God is not only saying all of your rags, all of your works are like filthy rags to me. God is literally saying all of your good works are like filthy menstrual rags to me. Why did God do that? It's not that God is hung up on a woman having a period. That's not the point. The point is God is trying to drive home the truth that a rag is, you think your good works are really impressing God and you're really going to be blessed by God. But God is telling you the exact opposite. He's saying, I view your good works or your religious works, the rags, like filthy rags. The filthy rags being those rags which were used before cultures developed, whatever you call it. I'm a male, so forgive me, feminine napkins or whatever you want to call it. Before those things came around, women used rags, had their period, and then they would wash those rags thoroughly to sanitize them. So that's how God views all of our good works, male and female, like filthy rags. So what's the point? The point is simply this: God does not want us to look at other people and be judgmental, and in the secrecy of our minds, we're judging them, we're evaluating them. We do not have the right to evaluate or judge anybody. You can go to certain churches, you can go to certain Christian meetings, you can hang around certain Christians, and they may not say a word to you verbally out loud, but you can feel where you can sense the spirit of judgmentalism. They're judging you because they have a list of things which they believe make you holy or unholy. Now, they may be right in their list. They may be scrutinizing you in their list, and they may be right. The things that they say are sin or missing the mark of God may very well be what you're judging them on. But here's the catch. You don't have the right. I don't have the right to add all those things up and make a determination based on my fallen human nature, make any kind of determination which might minimize the God-given potential that is locked inside of every single person. We don't have that right. And the minute we start to tiptoe over into that area, although we may not be doing all the sins that we think disqualify another person, when we step over into the area of legalism, being judgmental, and writing people off, we are then committing sins before God that are literally far worse than any of the sins that we see other people doing that we believe will disqualify them from either salvation or God's blessing. In other words, what God is trying to do, He's trying to deliver us from a spirit of judgmentalism. God is trying to set us free from legalism and being a legalist. And that's the sum total of it. Notice, if you look at all cults, and if you look at all cult-like Christian religious groups, including some churches, when you examine these organizations, you notice that they suffer from a common deception, a common theme. Almost all cults, and that includes cult-like religious churches and cult-like Christians, almost all cults have a system, a point system of some kind. They may use any different vocabulary that they choose, but they're all utilizing and imposing upon their followers a point system of do's and don'ts. And to the degree that the people will do the things they're told to do and earn the points they're told to earn, then they get in good, or they climb up some kind of invisible scale. There's always a hidden or overt measuring mechanism. And the reason for this is that the root demonic spirit that infuses itself in people is a spirit that not only condemns, a spirit that not only is legalistic and judges, a spirit that not only fosters judgmentalism, because that's what all these things do, but on top of all of that, in every cult, every Christian group that slips into, or individual, Christian individual, that slips into the modality of legalism and judgmentalism, like in cults, when you examine it, you see that not only is there a demonic element to it, a demonic element to the deception, but you see that the deception was created demonically for the express purpose of controlling people, of putting people under a yoke of control. A yoke of control. That's the ultimate game of the demonic powers. They will use judgmentalism. They will teach doctrines which subtly teach you how to manipulate people based on their performance or lack of performance. And you have gigantic religious movements in the world today that claim to be Christian. You have gigantic religious movements that claim to be Christian, but they're not built on salvation by grace. In their very foundation, they're built on a religious deception that you can be saved, that you can come closer to God if you will perform the list of things they're telling you to do in their particular cult, giant denomination, or whatever. Again, it is a control mechanism. So let's look at what the Bible has to say about this control mechanism so that we can dismantle it in our lives and dismantle it in other people's lives. This is really looking at the very core issues of spiritual warfare. And when we understand the bottom line issues of spiritual warfare, we can be set free and we can set others free. Okay, we're coming back in just a second. This is the Paul McGUIRE Report. Visit paulmcguire.us. We'll be back in just a second. You're listening to the Paul McGUIRE Report. This is Paul McGUIRE. Okay, I've read you this passage or passages of Scripture many times, but it goes completely in line with what we were just talking about. And that is from the book of Revelation, starting Revelation 12, starting verse 7. And war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought. But they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Then I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, Now salvation and strength, and the kingdom of our God, and the power of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brethren, who accused them before our God day and night, has been cast down, and they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. They did not love their lives to the death. Okay, so what does this mean? Well, number one is we are currently in this massive war that Revelation 12 describes. It's a war between God's angels and the devil's demons, or the dragon. So Michael, who is the chief angel, fought with the dragon, which is Satan. And the dragon and his angels fought. So there's this incredible invisible realm or invisible world, all-out war going on. And guess what? You and I are right smack dab in the middle of it right now. That's the explanation for all the chaotic events you see. And so you've got to understand that. You're not here for a picnic. There's times of enjoyment. There's times of blessing. But we are, after all, in the great spiritual war. Now, and they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So who is it that does not prevail, that does not press on towards victory? Who is it? Well, it's the devil, the demons, and the fallen angels, and the hierarchies of demons. They are the ones who will not prevail or win. They are the ones that were kicked out of heaven. So that's why it says, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. Well, why did they get kicked out of heaven? Because they became evil, because they began to follow Satan instead of God. So the great dragon was cast out. This is making reference to Satan himself being cast out of heaven. Satan is the great dragon. So when we see dragons as specific symbols, we need to open our eyes. There's a reason why in the Rothschild castle estate that is in the city of London, but remember this, in the city of London is a second city known as the City of London. So there are two cities of London in London. The first city of London is the one where all the tourists go and you see all the activity. That's the commonly known City of London. But within the commonly known City of London, there is a secretive place known as the City of London. This is an entirely separate City of London where all the international bankers, the super globalist elite and their institutions, or some of their institutions, are headquartered in the secret City of London that is inside the City of London. And there's all this high-tech surveillance technology, and all over the place, especially as you get to the Rothschild castle and estate. You see on all the pillars and buildings these very conspicuous, bright red dragon statues. Now, why would Rothschild have bright red dragon statues everywhere? I suppose that it is because he is wedded to or committed to Lucifer in some way, shape, or form. I mean, I can only hypothesize. Why else would you have the bright red dragon symbol all over your estate and castle inside the second city of London? So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. That's what Mystery Babylon is. Don't overcomplicate it. Mystery Babylon is this reality that we live in known as the world system. That is Mystery Babylon. Mystery Babylon is a product created by the great deceiver, the devil or Satan, who deceives the whole world. How does the devil or Satan deceive the whole world? They created a false kingdom of heaven, known as Mystery Babylon. The current world system, with all its deception and immorality and insanity, is Mystery Babylon. It is a product of the deception of Lucifer and Satan. And the serpent of old, why does it say the serpent of old? Because the serpent is first introduced to us in the Garden of Eden. It is the serpent of old, who is Satan, indwelling a physical serpent who's an erect, upright serpent being. And the serpent of old in the Garden of Eden lures Eve, who lures Adam into great deception, and the fall of man occurs. That new reality that was birthed after the fall of man occurred is known as Mystery Babylon, or Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. Then I heard a loud... Okay, so what is one of Satan's primary strategies against individual believers, against individual Christians? It follows the flow of what we were talking about in the last 20 minutes or so. And I'll read it to you. This is the game plan of Satan. This is why legalism and judgmentalism is so dangerous, because legalism, judgmentalism, it is a weaponized theology against the Christian and true believers. Then I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, "Now salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brethren, who accused them before our God day and night, has been cast down. And they," believers, true believers, "they overcame him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony, and they did not love their lives to the death." Okay, so we see that the devil or Satan attacks believers in the primary way of accusing them. Satan is the accuser of the brethren. Why accusation? Because Satan is trying to get you to believe the lie, and it is a lie. Satan is trying to get you to believe the lie that you're unworthy, that you're not good enough, that you did this sin, that you did that sin, and the list is endless. And once you solve all the sins you can think of, there will be some other thing that you may have neglected, harboring bitterness or who knows what, that Satan will bring up and attempt to accuse you of. And you can be victimized by a weaponized deception by Satan, who's the accuser of the brethren. You can be the victim to that, to the degree that you are ignorant of what the Word of God actually says regarding your total liberation and freedom in Jesus Christ. Now salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brethren, who accused them before our God day and night, has been cast down. Now verse 11, let's pay attention to it and gain the truth that sets you free right out of verse 11. And they, that's us, you and me, overcame him. Who? Satan. We overcome Satan by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And they did not love their lives to the death. So how we overcome Satan, who's the accuser of the brethren, how we are qualified in Christ instantaneously, how we can be victorious against the demons, the fallen angels, and Satan, and those people who are following Satan, how we can be victorious every single time, including right now at this very moment. How you can be victorious in every spiritual battle is to accept the truth of the word by faith, that you are saved by faith, not of works. So if Satan's trying to accuse you due to what he is accusing you of, which is a lack of works or missing the mark or sinning or whatever he wants to do, you can defeat him point by point, because your holiness did not come from works or legalism. Your holiness, your purity, your right standing with God, your entitlement to be used and blessed by God, your entitlement to come into the kingdom of heaven is all accrued to you by faith. By faith we are saved, not of works, lest any man should boast. So the way we overcome Satan, according to the word, is we overcome Satan by the blood of the Lamb. So we shut Satan's mouth up by the blood of the Lamb. Why the blood of the Lamb? Because by faith, when we appropriate the blood of the Lamb cleanses us of all sin, past, present, and future. So we are sinless in the eyes of God. It doesn't matter if Satan doesn't consider us sinless, because Satan has been a liar from the beginning. We are sinless before the eyes of God. We are qualified to be blessed in every realm before the eyes of God because of the blood of Jesus, because the blood of Jesus, when we possess it by faith, cleanses us of all sin. And that you should be walking in total liberty, total freedom, the minute you lay hold of that and claim it as your own. The minute you believe it, it's not a contingent upon your emotional state. Your emotional state and my emotional state can change moment by moment, second to second. Our emotional state is not what guarantees us entrance into heaven. Our emotional state does not qualify us to be used by God. What qualifies us to be used by God is faith in what the gospel of Jesus Christ has done, which is to cleanse us of all sin in Christ through the blood of the Lamb, who is Jesus Christ. Now you can walk from this second on in victory. Remember, victory is not contingent on your emotional state. Your emotional state is fickle. It's going to change moment by moment. You are saved by the solid rock, Jesus Christ, that bedrock foundation of faith in the Son of God. So walk free, because Jesus paid the price for all your sins on the cross. This is Paul McGUIRE. Visit paulmcguire.us. That's paulmcguire.us. And I really hope and I really pray that God would open your eyes and you would experience victory today and victory every day. And I'm not saying you're not going to have to fight a spiritual battle. You probably will. In fact, I know you will. But you will be victorious to the degree that you appropriate the Word of God. Help us spread this word, the Word of God, far and wide. God bless you. This is Paul McGUIRE. Visit paulmcguire.us.